Tonight, a new and dangerous turn in the Mideast as Palestinians attack and kill Americans. What happens now? A freak accident leaves many dead and injured on the world-famous Staten Island ferry. How could it happen? The Kobe Bryant rape case, another day of stunning courtroom revelations. A controversial move in a long-running right to die battle. Would this woman want to die? And this young man may just be the most notorious Chicagoan since Mrs. O'Leary's cow.
This is the CBS Evening News with Dan Rather reporting from CBS News headquarters in New York.
Good evening. The Israeli-Palestinian conflict claimed the lives of 3 Americans today in the ambush bombing of a U.S. diplomatic vehicle. This was the first time terrorists in that part of the Middle East have successfully targeted American officials, a sharp escalation and ominous expansion of the bitter Mideast conflict. As CBS's David Hawkins reports, it happened in the northern Gaza Strip, home to more than 1 million Palestinians and to terrorist organizations such as Hamas and Hezbollah, supported by a number of Islamic states, including Saudi Arabia, Syria, and Iran.
In more than 3 years of fighting with Israelis, Palestinian terrorists have purposely avoided striking American targets. Not anymore. Today, in the Gaza Strip, they blew up a U.S. diplomatic car with a remote-controlled bomb in the road, not unlike those used by Iraqi insurgents to kill American soldiers. The 3 Americans killed in the attack were described by embassy officials as security guards. Another was wounded and evacuated by helicopter to an Israeli hospital. The explosion totally demolished the car, blowing off its entire front end. It could also wreck U.S. peacemaking efforts here and Palestinian calls for more international observers. Palestinian officials worried openly about the consequences of the attack on U.S. diplomats. They were sent here to help us, said one. Prime Minister Ahmed Krea rushed to denounce it.
We condemn it strongly. We send all condolences to the families of those who's being killed there.
In a written statement, President Bush blamed the Palestinian Authority for the American deaths, saying it should have acted long ago to fight terror in all its forms.
We are shocked by this latest terrorist outrage.
The U.S. ambassador to Israel says the attack will not deter the United States from continuing to work with both sides to try to bring peace to the region.
This will ultimately be the most enduring response to murders and terrorists.
FBI investigators sent to the scene were chased off by stone-throwing children, despite attempts by Palestinian policemen to protect them. Many Palestinians hate the United States for what they see as its one-sided support of Israel. That seething anger has been mostly bottled up until today. David Hawkins, CBS News, the Gaza Strip.
In a closed-door session at the United Nations tonight, the Security Council is in final debate over a U.S. proposed resolution on Iraq. It would authorize a multinational peacekeeping force under U.S. command and urge UN members to help fund the rebuilding of Iraq. But the U.S. is still resisting calls to speed up transferring power to Iraqis. In Iraq, U.S. troops may soon confront a militant Shiite cleric who has incited violence against Americans and proclaimed an Iraqi government with himself as its leader. U.S. officials say they haven't yet decided whether to arrest him. Here in New York City today, a terrible accident involving one of the city's famous Staten Island ferries, popular with commuters and tourists. Authorities report many dead or injured after a ferry completing its run from Manhattan crashed as it was docking at Staten Island. CBS's Jim Acosta has the latest. Jim?
Dan, from reports that we're hearing right now, 10 people may be dead. 34 are in the hospital, where 20 are in critical condition, and there are 6 amputees. But those numbers could go higher tonight, as many passengers are unaccounted for. Witnesses describe a horrifying scene, passengers screaming and running for their lives as the vessel slammed into the pilings at the side of the dock. The crash tore off victims' limbs and ripped open an approximate 200-foot section of the boat.
And as we looked out the window, we saw that the boat was coming in skew to the pier, and within seconds of that we hit the pier and there was absolute panic.
The search for more injured goes on. As for the cause of the crash, Winds were high, and witnesses say they saw the ferry moving full speed into the dock. Detectives are investigating reports that after the accident, the ferry captain jumped ship, ran home, where he may have tried to kill himself. At this hour, Mayor Michael Bloomberg is saying that that ferry captain is alive and is being questioned by investigators. Dan?
Jim Acosta reporting live on Staten Island. The surprises just keep coming in the Kobe Bryant rape case, with the defense today presenting new evidence it says shows the basketball star should not have to stand trial for allegedly raping a young woman. We caution you there is graphic material in this report from CBS's Bill Whitaker.
Under aggressive cross-examination by defense attorney Pamela Mackey, investigating detective Doug Winters admitted the alleged rape victim never said to Kobe Bryant no. In another courtroom bombshell, Winters revealed the accuser herself admitted she had indeed had consensual sex just days before her encounter with Bryant. And then this, that the semen of another man, not Bryant, was found in the underpants the accuser wore to the hospital for her rape examination.
The defense is saying, wait a minute, prosecutors, you told a story, but you didn't tell the whole story. All told, what we've had in just 2 hours of cross-examination is the defense has really ripped gaping holes in the prosecution case.
Mackey argued the woman's sexual behavior cast serious doubt on the prosecution's central claim that lacerations and traces of blood found in her underwear came from the alleged assault. In fact, Mackey said the accuser's behavior throws the prosecution's whole case into question. By her own admission, the young woman was excited to meet the basketball star at the upscale Cordillera Hotel and willingly hugged and kissed him.
She even says she didn't really cry out, and most importantly, she says that when she wanted to stop, when she exerted a little bit of force, Kobe Bryant stopped. And I don't know how the prosecutors explain all of that away.
Fighting charges they have a weak case. Prosecutors insist they have much more evidence against Kobe Bryant.
I am confident that the judge will find probable cause and will bind this case over. And I am confident in the people's case versus Kobe Bryant.
Now, prosecutors say they've spoken with Kobe Bryant's accuser, and they say she's holding up under the intense defense tactics. The judge says he hopes to decide whether this case goes to trial by Monday. Dan?
Bill Whitaker reporting live from Eagle, Colorado. A federal health advisory panel voted today to recommend lifting the virtual ban on silicone gel breast implants. The FDA imposed that ban a decade ago amid questions about safety and health damage. But after hearing the pros and cons again, FDA advisors recommended allowing wider use again with conditions. Among them, women getting the breast implants would have to be told that they need yearly checkups, could need follow-up surgery, and that the implants could leak. In Florida today, a major battle over the right to die is over. Doctors stopped giving life support to a severely brain-damaged woman, life support she'd been getting for years. But CBS's Lee Cowan reports the ethical, medical, and family struggles that led up to this are far from over.
The life and death debate came down to the simplest of all gestures. Were these wandering glances the reflexes of a vegetative patient?
Open your eyes up. Open your eyes.
Or signs of a sick woman desperately trying to communicate? The answer may never be known. Acting on a court order, doctors removed her feeding tube, condemning 39-year-old Terry Schiavo to death by starvation. Doctors call it painless. Her parents call it murder.
He's our last hope. That guy up there.
I just haven't given up hope yet.
But Terry's husband calls it something else. Since the heart attack that starved her brain of oxygen 13 long years ago, he says he's been haunted by his wife's unfamiliar stare. And although she never left a living will and no public instructions on how she would want to die, he insists this is not how she would want to live, and made his case to at least 20 different judges.
Courts of Florida have determined what those wishes are, and her wishes are finally being implemented.
The decision was by no means easy. First, there's her young age and the fact that she could even breathe on her own. But she was not in a coma, from which so many people have made miraculous recoveries. For the most part, doctors agree that she had no meaningful mental life left, and her chances of snapping out of it were virtually zero.
And she is in a chronic and permanent vegetative state. And our science indicates that that is not a state from which one recovers.
Our Father, who art in heaven.
In the end, today's controversial action may be less about Shivo's right to die and more about who has the power to decide for her. Should a husband who wants to move on with his life be allowed to make the final call? Or should the parents who raised her be allowed to nurture their sick daughter until she dies a natural death? Lee Cowan, CBS News, Pinellas Park, Florida.
The government said today Medicare premiums for 40 million Americans are going up 13.5% next year. The monthly premiums for doctor visits and other non-hospital services will increase by almost $8, a total of $66.60 a month. Medicare patients will also pay more for hospital stays, nursing home services, and some home health care. Coming up next year on the CBS Evening News, a stinging indictment of Secretary of State Powell by his former weapons expert. We'll give you the inside story. And then later, it was a heartbreaking loss for the Chicago Cubs. But is a fan to blame? Or the Chicago players? Or was it the curse of the Billy Goat? President Bush is campaigning in California tonight. He's there for a round of fundraising speeches before he leaves on a tour of Asia. As part of his money raising, the president is devoting a lot of time to defending his decision to attack Iraq. CBS News Chief White House correspondent John Roberts has the inside story on that.
President Bush took his Iraq public relations campaign to the politically important state of California today.
Saddam Hussein was a deceiver and a danger. The United Nations Security Council was right to demand that Saddam disarm, and we were right to enforce that demand.
With new polls showing support for the war and occupation slipping, the president is eager to promote the idea that the world is behind him. That's why he's been willing to compromise to get a new UN resolution seeking the appearance of international support, even though few countries have been willing to put boots on the ground in Iraq. But as the president struggles to turn around public opinion, there are new questions tonight about his case for war. In an interview with Scott Pelley for tonight's 60 Minutes 2, Colin Powell's former weapons expert says Powell's report to the Security Council last February on Saddam's weapons programs was based on half-truths.
I can only assume that he was doing it to loyally support the President of the United States and build the strongest possible case for arguing that there was no alternative to the use of military force.
Powell says he is comfortable with his report, but Greg Thielman claims it was full of holes, that the intelligence didn't support all of Powell's warnings about Iraq's nuclear, chemical, and biological programs. The intelligence, he says, was made to fit the conclusion that Saddam was a threat.
Senior administration officials have what I've called faith-based intelligence. They knew what they wanted the intelligence to show.
Long before his presentation to the UN, Colin Powell insisted Saddam was not a threat to the United States, only to the region. Thielman goes even further than that now, saying it's unlikely Saddam was even an imminent threat to his neighbors. John Roberts, CBS News, Dinuba, California.
There will be much more on this story, much more of Scott Pelley's exclusive interview on 60 Minutes 2, tonight at 8, 7 Central. China is now the third nation on the planet to succeed in putting a man in orbit around the planet. China's first man in space was launched from a Gobi Desert spot yesterday. The mission was to circle the Earth 14 times before landing this evening on the grasslands of Inner Mongolia. China had a lot riding on a successful mission: money, national pride, and plain old down-to-earth global power politics. China has made it plain that it eventually plans to land a man on the moon. Up next here on the CBS Evening News, the downside of welfare reform. She played by the rules, got a job, but now she can't make ends meet. What happened? It's tonight's Eye on America. The Federal Reserve reports the U.S. economy is picking up steam, even to some extent the battered manufacturing sector. Still, the Commerce Department reports retail sales, key to any lasting recovery, fell last month for the first time since April. The stock market didn't like it. The Dow and the NASDAQ posted small losses. In the current U.S. economy, losing a job and making ends meet are very real concerns. So you can imagine what it must be like for some of the workers most at risk, those who went from welfare rolls to payrolls. What's happened to them? CBS's Jim Axelrod shows you in tonight's Eye on America.
John Delaney. These are my babies I take care of.
Barbara Hobbick thought she had broken the welfare cycle until she opened up her paycheck one Friday last April.
Hardest day of my life.
A single mom and school cook in northern Minnesota, Barbara was laid off. Knocked on your keister.
Made me throw up in the parking lot. Opened up that check and there was that notice, and that's all it took.
Until then, Barbara had been a welfare reform success story. Moving from welfare to work, she thought, for good.
And if I didn't live here, I'd live under that bridge.
But now, Barbara and her kids are living in a homeless shelter.
Welcome to our home.
She's looking for work, often taking 2 buses with the kids she babysits for extra money to the job center. But after some 3 dozen applications,
1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Let's roll.
Barbara still can't find a job.
Anything from A to Z, a convenience store clerk, to an overnight in an adult bookstore. They needed a night clerk, and I applied.
Welfare reform was conceived and implemented in the mid to late 90s when the economy was booming. It was an unprecedented success because most everyone looking for a job could find one. But that was then. This is a very different now.
There's been a growth in the number of families who aren't working and aren't receiving welfare.
We think that there's plenty of jobs still available.
Secretary of Health and Human Services Tommy Thompson insists that help is there for anyone who needs it.
And you can look at the welfare rolls. They've gone down by 60%, and those people are working.
Caseloads are down 60% in the last 6 years. But don't think all those people left welfare for work. In fact, during the economic downturn between 2000 and 2002, of the 1.3 million families who left the welfare rolls, more than half were unemployed.
We see the economy improving, and we see the caseload still declining, and we see people like Barbara who are under the same circumstances getting a job and improving.
If I can just get a chance, one chance, I'll make it work it right. I know I will.
But these days, in this economy, chances are harder to come by. In Minneapolis, this is Jim Axelrod for Eye on America.
Still to come on tonight's CBS Evening News. Call it bad playing in the clutch, call it a curse, call it interference. For Chicago Cubs fans, there's pain in Wrigleyville. The hunt for the man who may have caused some of it next. Tonight at Wrigley Field in Chicago, the Cubs are playing the Florida Marlins. The winner goes to the World Series. It would be the Cubs' first series appearance since 1945. And as Cynthia Bowers reports, Cub fans can only hope that this time they can escape the curse that seemed to suddenly strike last night when victory was oh so close.
A fan hunt is underway in the Windy City today for Chicago's most wanted. He's described as 26 years old, a computer consultant who also coaches youth baseball. Friends describe him as a quiet man who wouldn't intentionally hurt a fly, let alone his beloved Cubs.
I think any one of us would, if we were sitting there, we'd reach for the ball.
But when the eager fan knocked a catchable foul ball from a leaping Cubs left fielder Moises Alou, it got ugly right away. The fan had to be escorted from Wrigley by security officers. Today, his home remains under police guard.
If I could get my hands on him, he'd be in a whole world of hurt.
And if he's ever actually convicted, don't expect a gubernatorial pardon.
Someone ever convicts that guy of a crime, he'll never get a pardon out of this governor.
As for the team, just 5 outs away from the World Series, they suddenly collapsed. In classic Cubs fashion, giving up 8 eighth-inning runs to the Florida Marlins.
The black cat of the Cubs for 2003.
Forget the scapegoat. It could be the curse of the billy goat. It began 58 years ago. A fan whose goat wasn't let into the game, even though it had a ticket, put a curse on the Cubs. Since then, in 1984, 89, and again in 98, long-suffering Cubs fans have watched talented teams fall short of the World Series.
To expect the Cubs to win, no. You couldn't expect that because there's nothing in 95 years of anguish and despair that would lead you to expect the Cubs to win.
If the Cubs win tonight, this all may be forgiven, but it will be a long time before it's forgotten. Cynthia Bowers, CBS News, Chicago.
The way the ball bounces, part of our world tonight. I'll be back shortly here on CBS with 60 Minutes 2. A story guaranteed to make your mouth water about one of the world's great chefs. Plus, it may not look it, but it is one of the most successful companies in America. We'll show you why. We invite you to join us for 60 Minutes 2 tonight at 8, 7 Central, and at the usual time tomorrow for the CBS Evening News. Dan Rather reporting. Back in a few on 62.
For news 24 hours a day, click on cbsnews.com, partially sponsored by Walmart, a fun, friendly place to get what you want when you want it. Walmart, always low prices, always. Behind bars but still talking, former Governor Edwin Edwards, an exclusive tomorrow. Experience CBS News.